Hi friends, hello, happy Friday. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm super excited to be here today. I have a really fun tutorial planned and I'm going to tell everybody about the inspiration for it because it is exciting. So I see people popping in. I see Dawn, Linda. Hi Dawn. Hey Linda. And Dawn McDaniel, two Dawns, and Catherine. Hello, hello. People are going to keep popping in. I was just a tiny bit late in getting started today. Super fun. I hope all is well where you are. Hi, Rhonda. Good morning from Florida, she says. She's on vacation, spending time with her mom. That's really sweet. Okay, so again, welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm Lisa Hetrick. I have a super fun tutorial planned for today. And I was inspired by some posts that I saw in the Gina K Designs Facebook group. Okay, so this week I saw some posts from a couple different people where they took their card projects and they framed them. And I love this idea because you can use your stamped images to create art that you can frame and give as gifts. So it got me thinking a little bit about a card that I recently did for the Spring and Blooms release. And let's just go ahead down to the down camera. We're going to just kind of dive right in. So here is the card. Let's get the glasses off so I can see. Here is the card that I did for the Spring and Blooms release. It was my latest release. And I took the stamped image and I added some elements, some watercolored elements to it. So I changed the composition of this project and kind of made it more painterly. So let me just pop myself, let's see if we can get myself on the camera. Made this project a little bit more painterly. So it's a really super cute card, but I used the stamp to create a painterly composition. And that's what we're going to do today because I've been trying to figure out how I wanted to work this card into a project. And yeah, now I figured it out. So, okay, let's do a quick look at the supplies. And then I'm going to dive in. We're also going to have, let's just pop me back on the front here. Hello. Hello, technology. Let's take me off. We also, because I've been talking about the last couple lives, I've been really taking a deeper dive into watercolor techniques. We're going to do that today. We're going to talk a little bit about mixing greens. Really simplistic tutorial on mixing some greens with your watercolors. So let's go ahead and dive back into the down camera and kind of go over the supplies. So really quickly. So here is the stamp set that I am working with. It's called Spring and Bloom. This was my recent stamp set released with Gina K. We have, I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but we have a brand new stamp set release going live next Tuesday. But this is my latest release. I have some, let's see, I have some Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor that I'm going to be using today. I've always been using this cold press. I've used this a lot on the live, so I have two pieces of it here. And here's my little mixing greens thing. Hello, we've got some more people popping in. We're just kind of diving in a little bit. So here's the stamp that I'm going to be using, and it's this really big. It's like a crocus. I've talked about this in the last couple lives, but it has the look and feel of a parrot tulip. It also has a little bit of its stem, and I'm going to teach you how to take this stamp, elongate it, and we're going to add to it. Super fun. Okay, I have some watercolors here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those watercolors. I am trying out some more like new to me watercolors. Maimeri Blues. If you saw my recent social media posts, I talked about them. I got this little, I've got a pan set of these as well. of Maimeri Blues, which I absolutely love, but I found myself not using them as much, and then I wanted to experiment a little bit more with some of the tube paints. So that's what we're going to do today. But remember, you don't need to use the same supplies that I have. All the supplies are listed down below in the description too. I'm using my Gina K Designs Wild Dandelion, and I've got a handful of things over here in the jar. I've got some scissors, I've got some glue. I am going to be using some sequins, some of those disco ball. I think these are the disco ball sequins. They're flat from Gina K. I've got some watercolor pencils. We'll talk about that. And my picker. And I think I've got some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I'm not sure if I'm going to use that or not. But these are just kind of some standard supplies just over off to the edge here. Okay, I see some more people popping in. Pat's joining us. It's her first live. Okay, a couple things. If it's your first live or it's your 50 gajillionth live with me, when you need to ask a question, don't hesitate to ask a question along the way. Let's pop me back up here. I have changed up this these tutorials a little bit to focus on teaching you and providing like a watercolor tutorial right in the middle of it. So sometimes we're going to be focused on making the card. Today, we're not even making a card. We're inspired by this card that I already created, and we are going to make a frameable piece of art. And I've got this little mat here. So let's go ahead. We're going to dive in. We're doing a little bit something different today. It'll either be super fun and everybody will love it, or everybody will not love it. But hey, we're going to do it anyway. Okay, so let's dive in. I've got a piece. Let's see, we're going to get started. I'm going to do the mixing greens in the middle. And don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. I turned on that little graphic. Okay, good times. Don't hesitate to ask some questions along the way. And you can just like pop a little cue in your comment, and then I'll know it's a question that you need me to answer like right away. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Let me just kind of move my stamp set out. I've got my parrot tulip stamp here. And I'm going to, this piece is going to be, when we're finished, it's going to be a piece of frameable art. And I think I might give it away. So here's a little frame. So in my shop at indigojadeartshop.com, I sell my art prints, and I sell them with these mats. So I had this mat, and it's like a little 3.5 by 5 mat. So it works for your 5 by 7 piece of watercolor paper. And there's a backing. But right now we're going to use it as our frame for our composition and knowing where we're going to position this stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this up with some wild dandelion. And again, we're doing a little bit of a different project today versus a card. Now, you could easily modify what we are doing today into a card project. But we're going to make it a piece of frameable art because I've been super inspired by all of you in the Gina K Designs group sharing all of these frameable art pieces. Now, we want our bloom to kind of be up closer to the top here. So I'm just going to gently push that down in that wild dandelion. And I'm not so worried about what kind of impression I'm going to get because that wild dandelion is going to eventually bleed in with my watercolor. Now our stem stops here, but we're going to elongate it and we're going to add some leafery to it to create this botanical painting using our stamps. I'm so excited. Okay, so I'm going to move this over to the side. Tell me if this is something you guys, everyone's interested in. I know I'm trying out a few different things and sharing different ways to use our stamps and really focusing on some watercolor techniques. But I really would like to know if you feel like you're getting a lot of value out of these tutorials. Okay, so So just kind of let me know that in the comments along the way. Okay. Okay, so I have some paint here, and we're going to be using some yellows, two different kinds of yellows here. I've got a permanent yellow, which is like a lemon yellow, and I have a cadmium yellow. So it's a little bit skewing on the orange side. So we're going to be using these two colors. So in your stash, if you're doing this tutorial, you're just looking for a lighter yellow and a darker yellow. So usually the cadmiums are a little bit more opaque. We're going to be using that color just kind of as our highlight color, and we're going to walk through some of our techniques. But before, and then we're going to do some mixing greens too. So yes, so I'm getting some feedback in the comments that everybody's very interested in seeing how you make this happen, and making gifts of art is a lovely idea. It is. Okay, so we have our stamps, and we often make paper crafting projects, or we're either scrapbooking or we're making cards, but there's so many wonderful other things that you can do with your stamp images. So hopefully this kind of springboards you into some really fun ideas. Okay, I have some watercolor pencils, and again, I have a light yellow, a little bit of a darker yellow, and I have a green, and we're going to be using these in the end for some detail. Okay, now I want to get started. I've got, what do I have here? Number 6, a number 6 brush. I have a bunch of different round brushes here that I just grabbed. You really just need a round brush. I have some water over here, and I have a little bit of a paper towel. So what we're going to do is we're also going to do some editing to this image. I love these petals. So we've got backs and fronts of petals that we can play with. And we've got the stamens on the inside here. We're going to edit out the stamens, and we're not going to use them in our final composition. So I'm going to come in right now, and I'm just going to go around the petals. I'm going into this one first because it has that larger stamen here. And I'm actually just using the wild dandelion as my base color. See how I'm just blending it out, taking the edge with the tip of my brush and just kind of blending that out, and essentially making that stamen go away, because we're going to add in our final stamens with brush strokes, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. Okay, so I'm just going around, I'm skipping over a petal, going around to this one, and we're going to edit this look and feel. So this petal has a back like the cup of the petal. So I'm seeing the back of this petal, and I'm also seeing the inside. We're going to edit that out and just have that petal facing forward to us, just to take away some of the less complicated when we start to paint. So I'm just using my wet brush and just blending out that Gina K wild dandelion. And this is essentially giving me my first layer of color. It's also going to help the lines of the petals just disappear. Oh, that was a little bit too much water. Yes, people are sharing. You're all sharing that you love the technique tutorials. I do too. I love them too, and they're just super fun to teach. Okay, so I've got this petal over here, and I have this petal over here. So I want to, and I have this one right here. Now this one, I want to keep that cup that's happening as the petal, this part of the petal right here. I'm going to keep it. So we've got an inside and we have an outside. And I'm just lightly moving that color around. And we could dive right in. I've got my petal over here. We could dive right in with our paint and really get going, but this kind of helps us blur out our lines a little bit. It helps bring that wild dandelion in. It's also super juicy. I love that wild dandelion. And it just begins to give us what our underpainting, which is our very first layer of color in our underpainting. It kind of helps give us our shape too, so we can see what we're painting, and we can look at each one of these petals in isolation. Now this right here, you can see that there is like that cup happening again. I'm going to edit that out by just painting it in. I'm just editing that out. So keep that in mind. We have a lot of flowers in the Gina K line, and I love flowers. I absolutely love them, as you know. It's what I paint. But when we're drawing them, when artists are drawing them, we try to draw them as realistic as possible. So you have, you know, some cups and you have some shape to give it like that shape of the flower. So, but you can edit out when you're stamping and coloring these images. You can edit out these features. Okay, now this is going to dry. This is my first layer heading into that yellow. This is going to dry. You know what? There's one thing I want to do. I'm going to double back. No, I'm not going to. I just changed my mind. Okay. I am going to take my brush and just kind of blend this yellow out. Just so it just kind of blends out. And I just kind of pulled it down a little bit. But we're going to be doing some of our greens next. But first, I want to talk about, I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to move this to the side. I want to talk about mixing greens. Now, in your watercolor sets, and pop in the chat how many people, like, I know that many of you, because I recognize our names, our people that are popping in weekly have different watercolor sets. Now, a lot of watercolor sets that you purchase will already have like some greens in them, and you don't really have to mix them. But if you have a really small limited palette of colors, like this is an obnoxiously large palette of colors, you really don't need this many. And obnoxious isn't the right word, because these bring me great joy, so I do love them. But there are several greens in here. There's a cobalt green, a phthalo green, a green gold, which I absolutely love. That green gold is right here too. And there's a sap green. Sap green is like one of my favorite greens. If I just go ahead and kind of show you what that looks like. I love that green. I absolutely love it. But a lot of times I want to get a different kind of hue, I want to get a different kind of green. I want to be a little darker, or I want it to have a little more color in it. See, there's like these little bit of reds in here. Or I just want a green that maybe is a little bit more realistic and botanical. So you can learn how to mix your own greens to get different kinds of looks. So I did that in here. You can see that this green has a little bit yellow green and it's a little bit darker. So experimenting with your greens makes it like super, super fun. So I'm just going to do a really simplistic mixing greens tutorial just to kind of get us started. So I'm going to start with my warm color. So this is ultramarine blue. Oh, got a little bit too much water. This is ultramarine blue. So the trials and tribulations of being a lefty. Here's my ultramarine blue. I've got a little bit too much water going here. I'm trying to get a little bit more of a 100% milk kind of water ratio. So here is my ultramarine blue. This is a warm blue. Then I'm going to take my cadmium yellow, which is a warmer yellow. Okay, so my blue and my yellow, and these are warm. So I'm going to talk, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about warm and cool colors too, which makes it just kind of fun. So these are warm colors. So this is ultramarine blue, and this is cadmium yellow. Here they are, ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. They're single pigment. So this is PY35 and ultramarine blue. I literally forgot to write it in, but I will pop it up right here for you so that you can see it. If I can, oh, my glasses on, so let me put my glasses on. There we go. PB29. Okay. So this ultramarine blue. So these two colors, now I'm going to do something, I'm going to mix these two colors together on my paper. Now you could mix them down here on your palette, but I'm going to mix them on my paper just to do something a little bit different. So here's the ultramarine blue. I'm going to do a little bloop of it. Love this ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is a common name for blues in your watercolor palettes. I know that many of you probably already heard it. Clean off my brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of that cadmium yellow and I'm going to drop that in here, and I'm just going to start mixing right on my paper. And you start to get this. I got a lot of water going there. I'm not loving that, so let me, there we go. You start to get this green that's a little bit more of a botanical light green. It's a little bit, it's got a little bit more of this look here. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you, I mixed that on the paper. I'm going to show you what it's like to mix it in your palette. So when you're mixing your colors, you really need to consider controlling your water. So this brush holds a lot of water, so I'm going to take off some of that water so I can get some of that blue on my brush, and I really want a really nice concentration of that color. This is sort of like a whole milk. Clean off my brush, pop over here to my cad yellow, drop that in and start mixing that in, and you can see that my consistency of my mix is pretty thick, but I've got that really pretty color going here. Really thick. So let me get a little bit of water on my brush. Ah! I love that. Look at that color. I love that. Watch, I'm going to turn this a little bit and just kind of show you. So really simple. Now, depending upon the blue and the yellow in your palette, you're going to get different colors. Watch as I just kind of bleed that color out with a little bit of water and add that gradation of color. Oh, I love it, love it, love it. Now, like that was ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. If I went in and did a different blue, like this darker blue, which is more of an indigo blue and cadmium yellow, I'm going to get something a little bit different. So in your palettes, I'm just going to pop my face back on here real quick. If I can figure it out. Okay, in your watercolor palettes, you might have a couple blues, warm blues, cool blues. You might have a couple yellows, warm yellows, cool yellows, or yellows that are even skewing more towards the oranges. Play with them. Take each one of them and kind of mix them together to see what kinds of different greens you can create, because it's like endless. It's like an endless amount with playing. Now you could go too far and you can make mud, but that's okay. That's all part of the learning process. In my opinion, it's all part of the learning process. So each watercolor brand is going to give you a little bit of a different kind of look. And depending upon how much blue you put in versus how much yellow you put in, you can really change the hue of that color. It's super fun. It's just super fun. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to show you, yeah, Pat just said this reminds you of army green. Yeah, it's like an olive green. But those are those two colors. So like, let me show you what happens. And now I'm getting a little bit nerdy. So in the comments, if I'm getting too nerdy, tell me, hey, Lisa, you're getting too nerdy. But I just get really excited. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of that ultramarine blue. Just kind of pop that down here. I want to make sure, yeah, I've just been kind of chatting for like quite a bit about color mixing. Take some of that ultramarine blue. and take some of that yellow. This is a cooler yellow, and mix it. And I get a little bit of a different kind of yellow, green. Watch, take a peek at that green. See, that's more of like a sap green. So I took a warm color and a cool color and mixed them together and got a little bit something different. So that's just what makes it kind of fun. Now I'm going to come in with one more mixing color mixes. So I have, this is cyan or phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is intense. My Maimeri Blu's version, it says cyan. So you can see it's a really super cool blue. And if I take my, so let me just take a little bit of that down so that you can see it. So here's my cool blue. Clean off my brush so I don't contaminate that yellow. Get a little bit of that yellow up here. Here is my cool yellow. Cool blue, cool yellow. This yellow almost, this is lemon yellow. It almost kind of skews a little greenish. So I'm going to take a little bit of my phthalo, just get a nice juicy amount of that, and then pop this yellow in here. So I popped a little bit and I get that like viridian like color. Look at that color. Ah, I love it. If I take a little bit more yellow and add it to it, I'm going to start to get another kind of green. And if I kept adding a little bit more yellow, I'm going to end up with something like a yellow green, which I love this. In a lot of watercolor sets, it's called May green. But just simply by mixing these two colors, I got that. Add a little more yellow, add a little more yellow. Or if I kept going the other way with it by adding a little more blue, you would get something a little bit different. One other thing I want to share, nerding out. Okay, so I've got this color over here. That's like jade. Yes. Yes. Yes, Catherine, it is. Okay, so I've got this color over here. I'm just kind of, I've got a lot going on here. I'm running out of paper. So I've got this. Oh, I don't really want that one. Let's see. I want to show you, I'm going to clean off a little spot here because I want to show you one more. And then we got to get started on painting our tulip. Let's clean off my palette here a little bit. Just kind of got nerdy with the mixing greens. And again, I could go on for hours. Like I could go on for 2 hours probably just showing you different green combinations. But first, we're just going to take a little bit of that ultramarine and mix myself up a green over here. Okay, mix myself up a green. Take a little bit of that cad yellow, drop that in, and get that dark green, that olivey like green that I was going for. I'm going to flip this over. Or do I have another sheet? I have another sheet sitting around here, don't I? Yep, I do. Okay. Just want to do one more thing. So I've got that olive green color. This is pretty watered down too. I've got that olive green. Kind of like it. If I took a little bit of Payne's gray, a little tiny bit of gray, and added that to it, a little bit more, I can get an even more like black green. It's a little bit weighted down. Let's add a little bit of blue. See how I can just keep playing and playing and playing with this. And because the pigments are single pigments, I'm just keep mixing these greens. Look, and I'm just getting more and more, having a little bit more fun with it. You can keep adding to it to get deeper shades of green, a little bit more realistic. a little bit more realistic greens, which is kind of fun. Okay, I totally nerded out on the greens quite a bit. But the other thing is, in your set, you might have a nice color, like in this set. There's this color, green gold, which is gorgeous. It's a gorgeous color. And I could add a little bit of blue to it and really darken it up a little bit. See, I just added a tiny bit of blue to that green gold, and I really got a very different green. So these are all like kind of naturally kind of greens. Super fun, really easy way. So I encourage you, just try in the watercolor palette you have, or if you're using your inks, ink pads or re-inkers, blue, yellow, mix them together and alternate like how much blue you're putting in, how much yellow you're putting in, and really play with the different kind of formulas you can. This is like the Craft Your Joy lab. We're playing and experimenting with different kinds of greens that we can get. Now you can do this with any color, any color. All right. So we're back. We're back to our painting, and I'm going to hone in on doing the greens. Then we're going to come back and work on our tulip. Let me just get this little bit of water off of it. Okay, I've got this little diagram here. Now with your round brushes and using the belly of the brush, you can get different kinds of lines and different kinds of leafery. And that's what we're going to do today. This is just showing you different size brushes. You can get different shapes and sizes of leafery, which is super fun. Okay, now I'm going to come in. I've got, this is a number 6 brush, which I use a lot because it comes to a nice, really super fine point, and it is kind of a medium-sized brush. I didn't realize my face was still on the camera, but okay. I'm going to mix up some greens for starting to paint our green. I think, now my wild dandelion color is very cool. That's my base color, and the lemon yellow that we're going to use next is kind of cool. Then we're going to take our cadmium yellow, or our darker, like almost kind of orangey yellow, over top for details and add in the warmth. So I'm going to start with a cool, I'm going to mix up, let me just get a nice mix of that cool blue over here. Catherine just shared, I would love to see you do mixing reds, blues, and purples to get burgundies and maroons, since Gina doesn't have those colors. Okay. You could totally do that. I think that's a great tutorial. Fantastic tutorial. Ruth Chadwick just popped in. Hello, Ruth. Okay. I've got my cool phthalo. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cross over. I've got my cool blue. I'm going to take a little bit of my cadmium yellow. So I'm crossing over into a warmer yellow. I'm going to pop that in and see what I get. This is what I mean when I talk about experimenting, because it's paint. It's paint. Look at that green. I think I'm digging that green. Popping that up. I really like that green as my base with this yellow. So let's use that green for our base. Now, we are going to follow this line. I'm just going to see how I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I just used the very tip of the brush and went down, following that line, and just kind of went down like this, using that little bit of color. And now I'm going to come back in. My brush is clean. We're just going to see, we're going to blend this out a little bit using the very tip of the brush. Just kind of work the color that we have here and just kind of blend it out a little bit. So my brush is wet, my paper is dry, and I kind of have a little bit of a hard line, and that's okay. I'm going to take a little bit more of that color while this is still wet and just pop this in. Hopefully, pop this in. and just kind of let the water do its thing. There isn't a ton of water in here. We're kind of keeping this pretty controlled. So brush is wet, paper is dry. So this is a wet into dry technique. And I just use the tip of that brush to draw that line down, to elongate that stem. And now we have this beautiful big honkin' flower. And we just created it with that stamp. So if I would have just created it with the stamp and stamped it and colored it in, it's kind of just the top third of the flower. Now we've elongated it. And look, when we put our frame piece over it, ha-ha! It's going to look like this beautiful flower you painted. Oh, nothing would bring me more joy, friends, than to see you all paint your own little art pieces with stamps that I have created for you. Love it. Okay, brush is wet, paper is dry, just dropping in a little bit more color. And just kind of letting it do its thing right up here at the top. So I have a concentration of dark colors right up here at the top where my flowers are. Everybody is popping in with yes on color mixing. Yes on color mixing. That's cool. That is super cool. I know that I've asked that question before, and many of you have shared that you were interested in that. So I've been trying to integrate that into these tutorials in a really smaller way. If you've taken my Watercolor Wonderland course in the Craft Your Joy classroom, and I know Cherie is here, she's taken that class, or she's in that class now. I took a dive into color mixing in there, but really at a top level. So taking another deep dive and experimenting with like getting burgundies and getting different kinds of colors is something we can do. It's super fun. Okay, now I've got my leafery piece here. I've got my stem. Let's start thinking about what our leafery is going to look like. Like we're going to want to come out here. You can come up here and just kind of let that piece go up there. So this is our beginning composition. I'm going to say, take a pencil, a very light pencil. Normally, I'm just going to wing it and just start putting leafery in. But here's a really easygoing way to give us a sense of where we're going to go with our leafery, so we can just focus on the brush strokes. So I'm going to come out here and just kind of put a little faint line going like that. So I know I'm going to come out with a piece of leafery here. And then right up here, just kind of like right there. So no drawing experience required. We're not drawing in our leaves. We're going to do 3. I'm going to come up here, and then it's going to come out here. Okay. Really light pencil. So I've got this, this, and this. And let's see how that looks for our composition. Now, back to my number 6. Okay. And you can practice. We can practice using our rounds and working thin to thick lines in with the belly of the brush. We're going to practice that real quick. So I'm going to take my brush. It was pretty wet, so I've just kind of taken off some of the color. There's no pigment in it yet. I've got my mix of color right here that I'm going to use, and I'm going to end up having to mix up a little bit more. You're holding your brush completely vertical, and you can get really super thin lines. And then the more pressure you put on your brush, you can get thin and thick lines. And I've shared this before. And then put more pressure on your brush, drag and pull, and we get our leafery. Okay, so totally creating this composition with brush strokes. And the thicker the brush, if I used a little bit of a thicker brush, the thicker my my leafery could be. Again, I'll pull this in. So here's a 2 a 4, a 6. See how the 6 you can get pretty thick and thin lines? 8, 10, and 12 round. And you can get all of these different kinds of sizes. Love it. Okay. All right. Boy, I'm running a little bit later today because this tutorial is super juicy. But it's not going to take us long to do our bloom. It really isn't. Now I'm mixing up some more color. I've got some of my cool blue. I've got quite a bit of my cool blue. This, in my Maimeri Blu, this is cyan, but you know, you could use a phthalo blue or cerulean from your stash. Cool blue. And I'm going to take my warm, let's bring that down so you can see, my warm yellow, and just put that in there and start playing with my mix here. Now that cadmium yellow, last week we did a tutorial on opaques and transparent colors and semi-transparent. Cadmium yellow is a little bit more opaque. So my green, you can see my green is a little more opaque, but that green is a lot more realistic up against that cool yellow. So that's why we're using it. I know I'm really nerding out today with the cools and the warms and the this and the that. But if you're doing this at home and you're experimenting, just get out your watercolors and play with them. And then don't worry about the warms and the cools and the this and the that. I'm just sharing that with you because I think it kind of helps give some context when you're learning about your watercolors. Okay, I'm going to follow this line. I've got the tip of my brush. I've got a lot of pigment in here. I'm just going to follow that little line very thin. I've made a little thin line. I can make a little bit thicker, and then I'm going to bend the belly of my brush and then just kind of create that piece of leafery. I'm going to come back over that line, just kind of create some thick and thin lines that are just kind of going out. So we've got like some multiple pieces of leafery going on here. Kind of fun. Super fun. So, loving it. Okay. Loving the way that looks. We're going to eventually just come back over that, but that's that first layer. And I actually love the way that looks, that first layer. All right, I'm going to do it again over here. My greens, I didn't mix up, I need to mix up a big honkin' pool of that green. And I just keep mixing up just enough, which is fine. Catherine said, keep nerding out. Ooh, I added a lot of yellow there. So that became like super, let's just test that. See, I ended up with more of a yellowish green, which is fine, but that's not where I'm headed. So let's add a little bit more of that blue back in there. So see how I can go back and forth. Catherine said, keep nerding out. It's that you share this in-depth application that makes it so valuable. Thank you. Yes, once I start to get into it, my brain like starts to wire and think like, let's try this. Let's try this. This is what happens when you do that. And it changes. It just changes when you're depending upon the project you're working on. Okay, so let's go over here. I'm going to turn this way so that you can see it because, you know, the lefty thing. I'm going to pop this in here. Cheryl said, I love it when you nerd out. I learned so much. That's great. That makes me so happy because sometimes I think, oh my gosh, Lisa, you're just jabberwalking. And I think they might get bored. But maybe not. Okay, so tip. Bend the tip a little bit, bend the tip a little bit, just to get some variation in that line. Go ahead out, and then I'm just going to start right now and drag that out a little bit. So I've got that really fun leaf. And right on the edge here, see how the water, I started to lose some of the pigment. You can blend that out. Just tap, tap, tap a little bit of water on it. I am loving this. This is just making me so happy. Okay, we're going to come up here and do this one. I think I've got enough green here. I tend to not mix up enough pigment, but that's okay. Okay, now we're going to go here. Just kind of follow that line super thin. It stops here because that's where my petal is. And then we're going to come right up here And then we're going to just do that big honking petal right there. So we've got a little bit of variation there. Now, this line feels a little thin to me. Let's take a little bit of this green, kind of pop it in. And that's okay. I'm going to go back to it. I'm actually really holding my hands up very, very close on the ferrule of the brush here. So I'm really have kind of a grip on it, very much like a pencil. Okay. So it's really chugged up here. Okay. Okay. Kind of liking that. All right. So now my yellow greens, my first layer of yellow greens are in, and I'm going to leave it. I'm resisting the urge to want to add something over here. I'm resisting the urge because my eye keeps saying, put something there, put something there, put something there. But remember, that's just your brain telling you that, oh, it sees white space. And our brains are often conditioned to put something in the white space. And really, if you leave the white space, it adds a little bit more room for your eye to flow around the composition of your project. So again, just nerded out about white space. Okay, I'm flipping my, we're gonna leave my greens. We're gonna come back and we're gonna add some details to these greens. We've only added one layer. We're gonna come in and add some details with some watercolor pencil in a bit. But now we're gonna go back into our blooms. And I think, yeah, I'm gonna keep with my number 6 brush here. And I'm just gonna come back in with some of my lemon yellow. So let's get a little bit of lemon yellow going. This looks like I got, I got a little bit of green in there in that lemon yellow. So I kind of contaminated it a little bit. So my brush had a little bit of blue on it, but that's okay. But I really do want a pure, let's just put a little bit more down. I really do want a more of a pure yellow for this layer. Okay, clean off my brush. Really super clean. And just tapped it off a little bit and just get a nice little juicy amount mixed here. Clean off my brush again. Now we're coming back to our painting here. My brush is clean. My paper is dry. Now what I want to do is I'm going to concentrate some of my yellows from my center points out. So I'm just going to add in a little bit of water here. We're going to do a wet into wet. And I'm just going to go petal to petal. Now the yellow wild dandelion underpainting just kind of tap, 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 tap. Just kind of really helped us to see where my petals are. And this part of the painting is going to come together really quick. So I'm just going to drop in some of that yellow and just kind of coax it into the, let it do its thing and coax it in and out. So I've got another layer. I'm going to flip this over so that you can see. And I'm just kind of tap, 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 tapping and blending out what I have here to the edge. So it's darker in the middle and it's lighter on the outer edges. Okay, so I've got that layer of yellow. I feel like I like it. Okay, I'm liking it so far. Make sure my brush is really clean. You know what? That's not cool. All right, what's happening? I'm getting a little bit of blue in my green. So this happens, and this is totally and utterly my fault. So here's a good way to share another little lesson about keeping your paints clean, especially when you're working with your yellows. So see how dirty, this is my dirty water. And normally I work with 2 glasses of water, but I forgot to bring one. So I'm just gonna take and add some water here so that I'm cleaning off my brush. So cleaning off my brush once in the dirty water, then giving it a good clean, make sure it's absolutely clean in the clean water, because that's what I want to use. I want to use the clean water in my petals. so that that yellow is the cleanest it can be, right? And it doesn't have little tinges of blue in it because that blue just wants to make green. Okay, so just dropping in some of those colors. Nice little layer of color. Boy, I'm just swooshing all the colors around today. All right, let's bring this over here. Okay. Clean brush. Tap, 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 tap. All right, going back in with a little bit more yellow. Robbie just dropped in. Hello, Robbie. Now, I've got my petals here. We're not going to edit this petal. We've got this petal. We have this one and this one. So this one right here, I'm just going to give it some shape so that I can tell the difference between this petal and this petal. And I'm kind of going top down with my color. And I got a lot of pigment on my brush. So my brush was wet, had a lot of pigment. My paper was dry. Clean brush and just spread that pigment out. Use what you have here and spread that out. So I went more of a darker color up here and lighter down here so that I can get that definition of this petal. Okay. They're starting to come to life. You're starting to see them come to life. They're going to come to life even more. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to have my darker concentration of that yellow and bring it down into the center here. So brush is wet, paper's dry. Big concentration of that, a lot of pigment on that brush. Let's kind of spread that out a little bit. Follow along that line that I've got going there for my stamped image. And tap, 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 just to get a little bit of that color. That's quite a bit of color there. Okay. Woohoo! Whoa! I'm just going to let that finish rolling because I got water everywhere. Friends, you never know what's going to happen on live. Okay, so brush is clean, and I'm just kind of tap, 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 tapping the edges of that color, and I'm using what I have on my painting, on my stamped image here, and I'm just going to draw that down. Let me just turn this around, make it a little bit easier for you to see. And we've got a question. Let me just draw that down, just kind of draw that down to the center a little bit, just to get that little bit of color. Dawn McDaniel. Okay. Dawn, I'm going to pop that question up for you. Let's see if it lets me pop it up. What number brush would be the first to try? Okay, so great question. Very good question. So I tend to grab my number 6 brush or my number 8 brush. Number 2s are great for fine details. 4's good for fine details too. 12 is good for big washes and big areas. But your number 6 and your number 8s are going to be your workhorses because you can get super thin lines and you can get really thick and wide belly of the brush kind of leafery. So hope that helps. Number 6 and number 8 tend to be my workhorses. So do I have an 8 with me here? Yeah. Here's my number 6 and here's my number 8. You can see this one's starting to split a little bit. I've had these for like 15 years and they're just hanging on. Okay. All right, I've got a little bit of yellow. Now let's go back to this petal over here. Brush is wet, paper's dry. I'm going to take a little bit, I'm tapping some of that pigment in right here, just around that edge. Clean off my brush. Clean off my brush and start to bring that color down and into the center. The beautiful thing about this technique in this tutorial today is change up your colors. You can paint this parrot tulip in like this whatever color you want, which would be super fun. But I was kind of like, let's do it in yellow today. All right, we've got this petal right here that has that cup to it. Okay, so I want to focus. I want that cup. So this edge of the cup right here is going to have some detail in it. It's going to be darker right here on this edge than the inside would be. So I'm going to follow that line a little bit with some of this pigment on my brush. Tap, 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 tap some of that out. We're going to eventually add some of the oranges in, and then I'm just, with a clean brush, I'm just drawing out. And by drawing, I mean like just brush stroking and painting out to the outer edge that color. Dawn says, Dawn shared, I take only one travel brush and it's usually a size 6. Yes, 6 and 8s are the workhorses because you can get the thick and thin lines. Okay, I feel really good about the way this looks right now, this outer edge. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the pigment that's already on my brush and kind of, actually, hold on. You see that hard edge right there? I just cleaned my brush and I'm just kind of swirling it around just a little bit around that edge just to blend that out a little bit. All right. Now inside there, I just want to take a little tiny bit. My brush is super wet. I'm watering this yellow down to a skim milk mixture. So it's a lot of water, very little bit of pigment. And I'm going to just tap that in right here. So it's very, very light. Tapping it in. Clean off my brush. And then I'm just, clean off my brush. And just kind of pull that out a little bit to that edge. And I'm leaving some of that white of the paper. So you can see we've got that cupping, that cup happening with that particular petal. Okay, each one of these petals have some definition to it. So technically, because we did the wild dandelion layer first, we have a second layer on here. So we've got our second layer. Robbie just shared, I'm still learning about brushes, so thank you for taking time for the brush talk. Cool. And everybody chimed in, which is great. All right, I'm going to get my heat tool, and I'm just going to give this a little zap, because we're going to come in with another layer. We're going to do this I'm liking my yellow layers. And so I'm going to leave it. My tendency is to go in one more time with another yellow layer, but I'm actually really liking the variation that I'm getting here of lights to darks. I want to go in now and I want to add some depth with the cadmium yellow, which is like kind of bringing some of those orange tones in. And keeping this light, resisting the urge to kind of overdo it. See, I just kind of kept going and kept going and kept going with this one and adding more color and more color. So it's got a lot of texture to it. But I really want this composition to be a little more dainty, less intense. All right, so I'm cleaning off my brush. Now we're going to come in with some of this cadmium. What is this? Cadmium yellow. It's my warm yellow. I just totally blanked there. Okay. Dawn just shared, I love how you brought those petals to life, especially on the right side. Yes. And it really is just playing with the water ratios in your paints. So skim milk, 2% milk, whole milk. A lot of water, a little bit of water, hardly any water. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit of this. See how I'm just dotting a little bit of that cadmium yellow. And then I'm just going to touch my brush over it very, very gently. So I'm touching and I'm dragging down a little bit. So I'm starting to get some of those like texture lines too. So see how I'm just dragging down a little bit with the very, very tip of my brush. Remember using that very, very tip of the brush to get that line work going. Loving this. This is going to really bring some of that texture home. So I've got that going there. Clean off my brush again. Okay. And then I'm just going to tap, 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 tap and drag some of that color. And I'm softening those hard lines and dragging that in. Now I've got that, just creating that little bit of texture. See how I'm just kind of blending it and bringing it down. And I don't want to overdo it because I have this line, this petal right here. I'm going to take a little tiny bit of that color and I'm going to come right here very, very lightly. Do you see how I came around that petal very, very lightly down into the center here? I can feel myself geeking out a little bit. And I'm going to leave that. That's going to give me that definition between this petal and this petal. But I'm really going to go this way with it. Instead of taking that cadmium yellow in this way, I'm going to go this way with that cadmium yellow. So you really get that definition between this petal and this petal. Oh, friends, ultra nerding out a little bit. Okay. Now, and I've got this little bit of that cadmium yellow and I'm just tap, 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 tapping it in around those edges again. Very lightly, sort of just like little tiny brush strokes. Resist the urge to go for any kind of perfection with your line. Clean off your brush. And then I'm just going to, very clean brush, just draw that color out. Very, very gently. Moving that color down and blending it. I need to get a little bit more going here to get it to kind of go into my water a little bit. There we go. And I'm resisting, see how I'm just tap, tap, tapping those edges, and that helps blend it out a little bit. And I've got my whites. I'm still preserving my whites here. Adding a little bit back in right there. Everybody's saying, I love it when you nerd out, you learn so much. Yeah, so what you're hearing me say is what goes through my head when I paint. Okay? So it literally is like, ooh, I'm not liking that, so let's fix this. So you see how we've got that definition in the petal right here? And we've got this whites and we've got that graduation right into the yellow right there. So we definitely have some movement going. Now up here, we have a little bit more texture because we have our lines, and I'm liking that. I'm going to take a little bit of that cadmium yellow, just kind of up at that top at that outer edge, just adding another layer there. And what that does is that gives us some definition in that petal. It also gives that illusion of that petal coming forward, and we've got that white paper in the back, so it's boom, giving it that 3D look, really popping it up off the page. Now, if the hard lines, like some of these hard lines are kind of bothering me a little bit, so I'm just going to tap, tap, tap some water in there and soften it. I might need to come in and grab a little tiny bit of yellow just to kind of soften those edges, but I want to retain that white, that graduation of that yellow into almost white down here in the center. Kind of liking that. Feeling like this line right here is a little too sharp. So I'm going to add just a smidge of that yellow back in. The cad yellow, which is like the darker yellow. You can see I'm just barely touching it into a couple places just to get that variation between our lights and darks. All right, I'm digging these two. I'm going to leave them. Because I'm resisting the urge to keep going back in and noodling with it. And if I do, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to booger it up. And I'm going to oversaturate it with color. Like I kind of did that here. You know, I kind of did that here. But that's okay. That's how we learn. Part of the learning process is learning when to stop. I have found learning when to stop. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to come up around the edges here. Now, friends, this tutorial is going a little bit longer than our usual hour tutorial, but that's because I've kind of jam-packed this with a kind of a painting lesson, a watercolor painting lesson versus let's make a card in an hour. Okay, so if you have to go, no worries. You can always catch this on the replay. I am tapping in some of that cad yellow. I'm coming around the shape of this petal and around my shape here, just not all the way. And then I'm coming in right here where the petal is meeting this petal. And I've got this, I'm starting to shape some things in. Okay, cleaning off my brush, really cleaning off my brush. And I need to work a little bit quicker, but you can see I'm tapping in around the edge of where that cadmium yellow pigment is, that darker yellow, and I'm just kind of blending and working with what's there and blending and bleeding it out. Tap, 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 tap. So see how I'm resisting the urge to stroke, to paint stroke? I'm just tapping and letting water do its thing, letting the water move the paint. Tap, 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 tapping, pushing, tapping. Very cool. Loving it. Okay, this is a little bit of a hard line. So you can see I'm going over that edge a little bit, just brush blending it out. Just tapping. So it's a mixture of me tapping and just very, very gentle strokes. But look at that petal. It's already come to life. It's already come to life. And we've got that edge. It's not super hard, but it's got that 3D look and feel for it. Annette just shared, aha, this is your first time watching. Welcome, Annette. And I'm loving and learning so much. Thank you. Cheryl just said longer is fine for you. Good. I'm here with your cup and your paints and having fun. Yes. All right, we've got these 3 petals going. Catherine, 2 for 1, mixing and painting. Yes, everybody's just sharing some really, really positive comments today. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to come around to this petal. I'm going to leave these 3 alone. I'm digging the way they look, and I'm loving this composition. This parrot tulip is almost kind of turning in to something else. So we'll see. I'm going to come in. My brush is clean, and I'm just picking up some of that darker yellow, that cadmium yellow. Now, this piece out here, I already have definition between this petal and this petal, simply by this edge. Now, what I have here are 2 petals that touch. So I want to get definition between this petal and this petal. So I'm going to come to this bottom petal here and add my yellow, my darker yellow. Just kind of tapping that in around that edge. Tapping a little bit over here on that edge. Clean off my brush really good. Clean brush. Brush is wet. Paper's dry. And I'm coming in, I'm just tap, tap, tapping. Make sure you don't have too much water. You'll know. You'll know if you have too much water. It'll start to bleed a little bit. Just tapping the edge of what I just put in with that cadmium yellow and just softening it so that that petal, softening and dragging a little bit down so that that petal starts to come to life. Ah! Love it. Look at that. A little bit. I see a little something I want to tweak here. Just going to add a little bit of that color right there and dragging and drawing that down. Loving that. Got that definition. Got the absolute definition that I wanted between this petal and this petal. So what I'm going to do for this petal is turning it to my side. I've got quite a bit of that lighter yellow and whites in here. I'm going to come in with just a little bit. My brush is wet. Paper is dry. I'm picking up some of my pigment here. And I'm going to come to this outer edge. Just very, very gently. And I'm just tap, tap, tapping it in. Tap, 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 tap. Tapping that in. Clean off my brush really good. Kind of dry it a little bit. Make sure it's wet, but not super, super wet. Not sopping wet. And just start tapping the edges of what I did very gently with the very tip of that brush. You can see I'm just using the pigment that's here. Holy smokes, I'm loving this. And I'm not going all the way to that edge where this edge is. Just tapping and bringing some of that down, retaining that white that's there, but really giving some definition to that outer edge. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment, kind of right there. Bring that down. Now, depending upon the brand of paint that you're using, it may whoosh into your, remember, watercolor only goes where the water is, so it may whoosh in a little bit more. I'm using Maimeri Blu today, just more of a new to me paint. I talked about this in the beginning, and I just wanted to play with them today. They're single pigment paints. They're fantastic, but you can use whatever's in your stash. I've used all different kind of brands on here. I like them all. I like playing with them all. All right, I'm loving all these petals, loving every single one of them. Now we're down to our last petal here. And remember, we've got our white going in here, and I've got that cup happening with the petal. So it's kind of cupped like this, right? So I've got that outer edge going. Cleaning off my brush, coming in with a little bit of brush is wet, paper's dry. I'm going to take some of that pigment, and I'm going to just tap it around that edge where I had originally done the yellow. And I'm going to keep the inside of that petal white with just that very, very faint bit of that lemon yellow. Cleaning off my brush. Trying to keep from getting too soppy wet, but I want it to be wet. And then I'm just going to tap around my edges here. Tap, 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 tap. Now, I would like to hear in the comments how many of you are going to give this a try with your stamped images, creating a piece of art that you can frame, maybe give as a gift. I would be honored if you used one of my stamp sets and created a piece of art and gave it as a gift. How wonderful that would be. So look at that. You can feel that cup. You can see the cup. You can feel it. It almost feels incredibly 3D. Now, what we do have here is we have some beautiful yellows inside, but I also can see a line here of that wild dandelion. I'm going to try to blend that out a little bit. It's not bothering me, but I want to see if I can blend it out a little bit. My brush is wet. I'm going to take the tip of my brush into that lemon yellow. And I'm just going to take the tiniest bit and just tap it into that line. And then I'm going to clean off my brush. And then I'm going to come in and just tap, 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 tap it out. Just to see if I can blend out that look. And it looks like I did. Love it. Okay. I feel like the flower's done. Dawn McDaniel just said, definitely, but not sure it would be worth gift giving. Yes, it would. Anything that you make with your hands and you give to someone as a gift is a treasure. A treasure. I don't get a lot of things made. People don't make a lot of things for me and give them to me as gifts. So when I do get them, I feel like it's a treasure and I keep them. Okay, I am loving this composition and I am loving the color work. So now I'm just going to kind of come in and do some of the detail work. Let's take a quick look. I'm going to put my frame over it just to kind of show you. And I love, in the beginning, I was resisting the urge because I was going to put little tick marks in here just to kind of tell me where not to go with my leafery. But I love that the leafery just kind of hangs out over the edge. I'm loving that. Kind of bleeds off into the frame. Okay, I'm going to take, this is a deep cobalt green. It's just a green watercolor pencil. You can take a look at it. It has a little bit of a blue-green in it. So I kind of like that. but I'm going to, I see some comments. Gina said, I have most of your stamp sets. I have most of your stamp sets, Lisa. I will definitely be trying this technique as I know I will be able to find a big honkin' flower. You should. I have tons of honkin' flowers in, right? Super fun. Annette says I will try and give it a go. Don't have any of your stamps as I'm from the UK. Not sure where to purchase them. You know what, Annette? I think if you take a look at Gina K's website, she has all of her retailers, and I know there is a UK one. But hey, Annette, no worries. You don't have to use my stamp sets. Use what you have in your stash and do this technique because I know you can do it, and it will be super fun. Okay, I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to go ahead in and I'm just doing a little bit of detail. And I am not going to, I'm just using the pencil like I would a colored pencil. And I'm not going to brush that stuff out. I'm just using the edges and just kind of bringing this in. I might wet it. Let's see. See how I'm just kind of gently doing a couple little stroke marks with the pencil to add a little bit of graphic detail over top. You could just leave, you could skip this whole thing, but I like the idea of just adding a little bit of pencil in there. Now, let me see, I might just leave the pencil the way it is. You could use color pencil if you wanted to as well. I wanted to try it with watercolor pencil because I want to see how I feel about just adding a little bit of water. So I got a little bit of water at the tip, and I'm just gently touching those pencil marks, and it's breaking up that pigment. I love that. I think I do love this. It's breaking up that pigment, but I'm not making it super smooth, but I am breaking it up a little bit just to get a little bit more texture going over top. Ah! You could skip this part if you want it to be blendy smoothie, but I like the idea of adding a little bit of texture over top. Oh, Dawn's got a really great question. Let me pop that up. Do you have a specific pencil sharpener for the colored pencils? I have one that does not work very well. Okay, the pencil sharpener I have, Dawn, is one of those big honking ones that you can get from like a Staples or something that like teachers use on their desk, right? It's got a dial for different sizes. Let me take a quick look at the brand. Oh, okay. I would grab it and show it to you, but it's big. It's like one of those it's called a boss stitch. BOS. Let's see if I can type that in the comments for everyone. Let's see if my comment will come in. Boss stitch pencil sharpener. Hopefully, oh yeah, I can comment. I didn't know I could do that. So I use it for my pencils and my watercolor pencils, and I can get them to a really super fine point. And apparently my comment went in twice. So good times. Okay, I'm loving the greenery, loving the way this looks. Now we are dry. This is dry. I'm going to leave my bloom. I'm resisting the urge to kind of come in with, I could come in and add a few little lines. And you can see I'm just kind of gently touching some of those edges. And I'm kind of hesitating because I'm resisting the urge to add too much detail, but I'm gently like adding a few lines in here with the pencil. It added a little bit of texture, but I want to leave it. Now, I'm just touching this to make sure everything's dry because we're going to go in now and we're going to add the stamens to the middle. Now, remember in the stamp image that's somewhere on my desk here, the stamp had the stamens and we edited those stamens out of our painting. I'm going to go in, got some Payne's gray here. This is like a blue gray. Let's get a nice juicy amount of this here. You could mix up a black, or if you're in your watercolor set, you might have a black. I'm going to use this Payne's gray. It's more of a blue gray. I love it. Or you could do this technique with a marker if you'd like to. Okay. Brush is clean, brush is wet, brush is not super wet. I am using a number 3. And here's why. Because we're going to do the stamens, and this is a brush stroke for the stamens. This brush doesn't hold a ton of water. I'm going to hold the brush and just, we're going to do these little tiny, like, teardrops, just with that very, very tip of the brush. And we can elongate that teardrop. Oops, let's do it again. Teardrop, and with that very, very tip of the brush, we can elongate it to get that stamen. Okay. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Hi, Geraldine. Geraldine's just popping in. No, what have I missed? Oh, Geraldine, it has been fun. We are coming in the home stretch of this design. And you can catch the replay. And we are definitely running over today. This is a much longer lesson because I have jam-packed this lesson, watercolor lesson, with a lot of value and a lot of extra watercolors, chitter chatter, nerdy stuff. Oh, sorry about that motorcycle. That was my neighbor. He likes to ride. He's heading out on this beautiful day. Okay, from the center here, we're just going to, I'm going to turn this a little bit so that you can see it. I've got the tip of my brush. I'm making these little teardrops. These little teardrop shapes. Just kind of from the center out. They look like little seeds. Okay. Because we edited out the stamens. So now we're kind of adding them back in. Cleaned off my brush. And now I'm just taking the tip of my brush to the edge of those little teardrops, and I'm drawing a little bit of that color down in a little bit of a line. Just kind of drawing that down in a little bit of a line, just to get that faint look in the stamens. I could bring more down if I want to. Just kind of let that be. I feel like I want to put a stamen right here. So I'm going to put one right there. And I think we're going to let that be. We're going to let that be. Love it. Oh, I kind of want to put one right there, but I'm going to let it be. Okay. Now, we're pretty much done this composition. So what I want to do, I'm going to clean this off. Clean this Payne's gray off my mat here so that I don't end up getting it into my painting. I'm going to bring in my mat. Now you could just pop this in your frame and you'd be good to go. Oh, look at that. I boogered that up. I got a little bit of green on there. That's all right. I can get that out. I took the sentiment. You could add a sentiment to this. And I think I want to do that right down here at the bottom. That kind of completes it. So I stamped the sentiment, let your dreams blossom, and I just cut it out. Now I'm just going to cut in these little triangles. You could use one of your dies, but I didn't do that. Catherine said that technique for the stamen is worth the whole tutorial. So yeah, cool. I'm glad. So what you can do is just edit with your photos, with any of your stamped images, you can edit that out. I love that. We could pop that up if we wanted to, but I'm going to let it be more of a two-tone and stay there. And then I've got a little bit of gems. I want to put a little bit of these little disco ball things in. Robbie just shared, I love it. I started putting a little pin inside my tip here because I keep leaving the cap off of my glue and boogering up my glue. Robbie just said, I just love watching you get into your groove. You make me want to paint more. Yes! I'm so excited to hear that. Okay, I'm just popping this little sentiment. Let your dreams blossom. How fun would this be? Like, we're in like graduation season, right? People are graduating from schools, you know, graduating from different things. This would be a really fun painting to give to someone who needed a little bit of encouragement, that is moving on into like the next adventure in their life. How fun is that? Okay. So I'm keeping this frame on, but remember, you could just pop it in a 5x7 frame, but I've got this little mat. I'm keeping this frame on, and I'm just going to pop a few little gemmy gems. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Let's pop one right here. Randomly popped my glue. I'm going to use my picker and then pop some of these little gemmies on. I like these because they don't have the holes in them. These are from Gina K. And all the products, all the things that I use today are linked in the description for your viewing pleasure. But remember, you do not need the supplies that I use to create this project. You don't even need this mat. I just had it, and I boogered that up. I'm hoping I can get that out. I think I can use my little that eraser and scrape that out. Now, I'm digging the way this looks just the way it is, but I really want to add some splatter just to kind of just give it one more last bam. So I am gonna add some yellow, really, really light yellow, this lemon yellow. Got a little bit of this lemon yellow. All over this big honkin' brush. And I'm going to leave the mat on there because if the yellow gets on the mat, that'll be cool. That'll be really cool. Adding a little bit of yellow in that white space that, remember at the beginning where I said it might bother you. I'm adding a little bit of yellow around the edge of this mat. And then I'm just leaving it be. Put a little yellow over that little bloop that I got right there. All right, I'm loving this. I am loving this painting that we created together today using stamps and just adding a little bit more detail to create this kind of botanical look. I'm loving it, loving it, loving it, loving it. Okay, I'm going to pop back to the front because whoa. And I'm surprised so many of you hung with me. Hour and a half today. I can't thank you enough for hanging with me. But this lesson was a lot more involved because we made a painting together, which is super excited that you can pop into any 5x7 frame and you have a beautiful gift or a gift to you to put on the wall to let your dreams blossom. Just love it. Okay. All right, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. I see all these beautiful comments in the comments section here. Love this. The splatter on the frame makes the painting. The splatter on the frame just kind of brings it all together, right? So because I had that mat and it just kind of brings it all together. Okay, friends. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm super excited for a couple things. Next week, next Tuesday, we're going live with Gina K. I've got a brand new stamp set release coming out. So next Friday, I will be going live with a fun new tutorial using that stamp set. And of course, there will be some watercolor. There will be some fun, nerdy watercolor lessons. If you're at all interested, I have some new friends that have popped in today. If you're at all interested, please consider getting on my email list. The link is below in the description. I send out an email once a week. I also have a free community in my craftyourjoy.com classroom, in my online watercolor classroom. This community is chock full of free content from me and lots of freebies. I used to have this community on Facebook, but I was never really sure if anybody is seeing my posts, so I created my own community in my classroom for you, and it's absolutely free to you. So I hope you can join me. I hope you'll join me there as well. An email goes out on Friday later today, from the community, from inside the community, letting you know all of the different things that have been posted, the content that I've posted there for you for the week. Okay, friends. So I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. I hope you got an immense amount of value out of this watercolor lesson today. You learned a little bit about mixing greens and stretching your stamps even further to create some really fun art projects or frameable art. And you can totally do this, and I would love to see what you create. So have a great weekend, friends. I see everybody saying thank you in the chat. I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me. See you next time. Bye, friends.